Sharon Milgram, and I direct the NIH Office of Intramural Training and Education. And I hope that Michael Gottesman, the Deputy Director for Intramural Research, will be able to join us. And if so, then Dr. Gottesman will have a few brief comments to make at the end. If he's unable to join us, I will wrap up on his behalf. You know, I started my morning reading some articles, and one of them pointed out that uncertainty was one of the hardest emotions for humans to deal with. And that really resonated beyond the uncertainty that we're all sitting through now as a country with the election. I feel this huge amount of stress around how things will go for all of us, and especially for our trainees during what I've come to think about as the COVID winter. And I decided that a good idea was for us to all have an open conversation about this early on. And I realized we haven't had a town hall that focused on trainees from the trans NIH space in a while. So I thank you for being here. And what I want to do is start by summarizing very, very quickly some data, and then talking about what we can do collectively to support trainees and each other through what's likely to be a very hard few months. And I want to start by actually saying that we have been seeing issues with mental health, with burnout, with a lot of difficulty in our trainee community for a long time, way predating the pandemic. And here are two papers about mental health issues with graduate students, one of which shows a 6-fold increase in the rates of anxiety and depression in PhD level graduate students compared to the broader population. That paper makes the point that supportive mentors and attention to work-life boundaries are protective factors. This third paper is a broader survey of the research community in the UK, looking not only at trainees, but at scientists at higher levels as well. And while it talks a lot about bullying and harassment, it also points out that 50+% of all of the respondents had sought or wished to seek help for mental health issues. And so we have had an issue in our community for some time. Now, the CDC released data looking at the impact of the pandemic on US adults in terms of mental health or substance abuse issues. And they show a substantial increase in all of these areas, including an increase in suicidal ideation. And so we entered the pandemic from a difficult place, and then we can see that the pandemic has added issues. And it's not just the pandemic, it's racial injustice, it's climate disasters, it's immigration policy, which is unwelcoming to important members of our community. It's the election. It's even how to talk to family members about the election. It's what we're going to do over holidays where travel is really going to be different than other years. Now, in a meta-analysis of 19 studies looking at the impact of mental health, we can learn some important information. And what we learn is that women, people under the age of 40, and students are the most vulnerable populations for increased stress, depression, anxiety, adverse psychiatric symptoms, and post-traumatic stress disorder. In this meta-analysis, a large number of papers come from studies done in China, obviously because of the progression of the pandemic, they have been doing research in that area for longer. But the papers that look at the US population show us that the most vulnerable groups in the US are 18 to 24-year-olds and then 25 to 44-year-olds. So these are our postbacks and our grad students and our postdocs and many of the other people around us in the community. Individuals from marginalized community and those lacking financial resources are at the highest risk. And while our stipends aim to be somewhat competitive, it's difficult for many of our trainees to make ends meet, and many of them face some financial instability. The cost of applying to medical school or graduate school for our postbacks. Many of our trainees from marginalized communities are supporting family members who have been out of work because of the pandemic. They are experiencing increased pressures as a result of the health disparity element here. And so we have a vulnerable population for sure. Loneliness is really a key factor, and it's one of the most prominent factors for depression and anxiety, where highly lonely individuals are 82% more likely to be susceptible to depression and anxiety. And while this is not data-driven, I have to say anecdotally, and many of the wellness staff in the OITE agree, that trainees are saying, "I am lonely," much more than I've ever heard in the past. We know also that there is an impact of the pandemic on early career scientists, scientists in general, some of it by discipline, because bench science is most highly impacted by the quarantines, by the issues with density in research spaces. Female scientists and scientists with young children report the greatest reduction in research time, and this certainly impacts our assistant clinical investigators, IRS scholars, many of our tenure tracks, our trainees as well. And hiring freezes and the rescinding of job offers adds another layer of stress into our trainee population. At least 40% of trainees at NIH are international, and even during non-pandemic times, international students are more prone to mental health issues. They struggle with the local medical system. Many of them do not understand insurance in the United States or how to access mental health care. And often because of that, they're less motivated to seek psychological services. But during the pandemic now, they're more isolated, much more stress of being far away, less access to public resources because of informational language and culture barriers. Many of our trainees are facing increased discrimination, especially Asian trainees, and a lot of increase in anti-Asian hate speech. But the honest truth is that I feel that this is impacting many of our trainees. And then, of course, we are in an environment which is somewhat unwelcoming to visiting scholars, and there's all kinds of executive orders moving through systems that make it even less inviting. And so for a subset of the community, there's additional stresses. The NIH did a study earlier in the pandemic, which identified very clearly that trainees were a really vulnerable population. Half had experienced a negative impact of being physically separated from coworkers. They were much more likely to say that they have a negative impact on productivity. That makes sense. Our bench scientist community is larger than people who can work very effectively from home. They have concerns about their careers. I'll point out one interesting statistic, and that is that nearly 70% reported using OITE services for mental health and wellness support during the pandemic. And I think that that's a number that I feel good about, but I also know anecdotally that there are trainees who don't feel that they can participate in our activities because they're during work hours. And I'm thinking a lot about whether we need to extend our hours of operation. I know that there are trainees who might mind read that their PI doesn't want them to attend these things, or maybe have heard sort of indirect messages about not being productive. There's all kinds of reasons why people don't reach out, but I want to make sure that everyone who needs support gets support. So I've been worried now for, I don't know, it feels like forever, but it's since the start of the pandemic. But something that really worries me is the data on seasonal affective disorder, which is a type of depression related to changes in the season, and it impacts 12 million people per year. And so we have COVID stress and career stress and lack of research progress stress. And we're going to be dealing with all of that in the midst of shortened daylight hours, very cold weather for some trainees, some in maybe North Carolina and Arizona are in slightly warmer climates. Maybe it won't be as dramatic. But our ability to connect with others is going to be pretty impacted by the drop in temperature. So there's a lot of reasons for us to pause for an hour and say, what can we do proactively to ameliorate some of this risk? And there are 4 protective factors that actually come out of those meta-analyses. And I want to just talk about them largely from the perspective of OITE, but I will stress again in the importance of NIH and institute resources, although obviously I can't list them all. But I want to make sure that people are aware of all the resources. I hope we can encourage each other to use them. And I would really love to hear if there are resources missing that you think we need to be offering. I think that I need to reevaluate and evaluate everything right now, because the single most important thing is that we safely get through this and that we bring our trainees through this together. So the first protective factor is that individuals learn, develop, and use positive coping strategies. And those with positive coping styles do better than those without. But this is a learned skill. Some of our trainees maybe got great psychosocial education around this in their families of origin or in their college or in some other space, but some have not learned a lot about resilience and wellness and positive coping. In some cases, their cultural milieu is different than the US cultural milieu or the science cultural milieu, and that's making it hard to access these positive coping resources. We have a variety of training webinars for that, and I'll talk about 2 monthly series, our resilience series and our mental health series. We have a drop-in every Wednesday lunch group focused on wellness. Yesterday, we got together and processed the uncertainty around the election. These are always have a topic, sometimes around physical wellness, sometimes around mental wellness, emotional wellness, developing hobbies, healthy eating, spiritual wellness, you name it. And these are really casual. People bring their own lunch and we meet on Zoom. All of these, I should say, are by Zoom or GoToWebinar. We have drop-in discussion groups that I'll talk about, and new wellness support groups for people who feel more comfortable with a set community that they meet with weekly. We have launched some new skills groups focused on wellness to actually teach these positive coping styles. And for trainees that need a safe place to speak individually, we have individual wellness advising. We make referrals both within NIH, working closely with the Employee Assistance Program, but also outside of the NIH, helping people access mental health resources. The second protective factor is social support. Individuals who say that they have enhanced social support are doing better mental health and wellness wise. And so one thing that we hear a lot from trainees is the importance of enhanced social support at the lab, branch, and institute level. And it's okay for some of those to be around discussing science, but sometimes they find it really supportive stress relief to meet and get together and talk about other things. We have a buddy system that we set up. Some international fellows and non-US fellows who live alone told us they were afraid to even go outside at the start of the pandemic because what if they got sick and nobody knew? So we have a buddy system for regular check-ins, and we have a meeting this week in the office to strengthen that moving forward into the winter. I note that lots of staff and trainees volunteered to do check-ins, and so we should be able to expand this pretty quickly. All of the affinity groups, and I'll talk about them soon, they meet weekly for lunch, and these are really great places for social support because most of those discussions are around what can you do on Zoom to have fun, what's a good movie to watch, what's a book. They can be a really safe place for trainees to talk about what's going on. And I think it's really important, and this is a mixed audience of trainees and PIs and admin staff and training staff. It's interesting, when I sent this to Michael, I was thinking he was going to send it out the PI listserv. He sent it out the all IRP listserv, and I got a lot of emails back saying, Sharon, who's supposed to come? And I realized it would be great to have this discussion with everyone. So to trainees, I want to say that there's sometimes a desire to just come and be lost in the discussion. You keep your camera off, you don't participate, you hear, but it's unidirectional. One part of enhanced social support is actually engaging in activities, and that's why we have so many small group activities. In terms of talking with the PIs, I know, and admin staff, I know that encouragement to participate and making it clear that this time doesn't need to be made up can make a really big difference. So it's really important. Enhanced social support isn't showing up on Zoom and listening to lectures. It's talking in those spaces. The third protective factor is time to rest and recharge. And I've thought about this a lot. And in fact, I had a conversation with my office about this. So I think given seasonal affective disorder, given the cold temperature, given the fact that for many it's the best place to be with friends and chat, that we maybe need to be explicit in encouraging a small amount of time off during daylight hours in every work week. Like not having meetings from noon to 2 and getting outside, especially in a day when the sun comes out and it can be so helpful to be outside. Travel is restricted, and a lot of people, because of that, are not scheduling vacations, even if they're staycations. We all need to rest and recharge. I think we all should think proactively about the holidays and how we can support trainees here over the holidays. And I think it would be interesting to come up with some nice ideas the week before Thanksgiving and over the time between Thanksgiving and the December holidays. A lot of data shows, and many trainees anecdotally are sharing that as they develop and engage in hobbies, they're finding a way to stop doom scrolling and being on the internet all the time, reading negative news and sort of feeling better about themselves. So even starting a group meeting with a little bit of a discussion about what people are doing to have fun, what their hobbies are, can help a lot. These protective factors make a big difference. Probably not a single one of them by itself. It's, I'm sure, this sort of multiple hit model of positive strategies. And then finally, the last of the protective factors was a sense of financial stability. I've actually taken that a little bit out of context. In most of the literature, it says the ability to get financial help when needed. And that refers to the fact that many people impacted by the pandemic have lost their jobs. But when you look more carefully and think about it, it's not just the ability to get help in that moment, it's that ability to feel financially stable. So I think that a lot of trainees are concerned that the lack of a lack of productivity could lead to a lack of renewal. And so what we can do is appreciate it's not business as usual, and we want to be as productive as possible. But depending on what we're dealing with at home, that may be less productivity than we wish. And that comes from both the PI side and the trainee side. I think it's really important to address those types of productivity issues up front and with support. And we would be happy to engage with you over discussions about how people can both deal with their lives and their complications and Zoom school and caring for others and sort of dealing with all these hard issues while trying to stay somewhat productive. Reappointments and extensions have been a remarkable source of stress. We have issued a lot of appointment flexibilities and extensions. I know that they are imperfect. I know that for international fellows, the whole visa situation makes that even more complicated. And so the earlier we start talking about what is possible, the better things are. On the OITE COVID webpage and on the Office of Intramural Research Sourcebook webpage, you can find these flexibilities. You know, early we gave a 6-month extension and we said we will reevaluate that. We did reevaluate that, and I appreciate that we need to keep reevaluating, and I'm very open to hearing from the community about what we can do to be flexible. Parents need even more flexibility between homeschooling and lack of daycare, and the fact that many of our parents are dual scientist parents. That's one I know we've talked about a lot, but I just want to reiterate again and again. And then I have seen an increase in postbac stress because they are struggling with remote interviews. Every school has its own system. Some schools have proprietary software. Some of our trainees do not have a really quiet place or a professional place to interview in their houses. And so anything that we can do to give both extra time and support would be really helpful. I note there's less travel, but more stress. And we've seen things like the Institute finding a laptop, working with IT to make sure the software can be downloaded, giving people some time to test it out, make sure it works. Private, quiet space on campus, even for students who are in group C or D, giving them clearance to come on campus one day for a safe, quiet place to interview and a really stable landline. So that's the fourth one, some sense of stability. So those are the 4 protective factors. And I thought I would just tell you the OITE resources in a little bit more detail and then take questions. So all of our wellness resources are at this website, and right afterward, we will email everyone who registered this slide deck and a 1-page double-sided handout of resources that both PIs and trainees can use. If you email oite-wellness@nih.gov, you can get information on all of these activities. If you want to talk with someone, if you're not sure where should I go for this issue, you can just email us. And I just want to stress those data where trainees said that 67% of the trainees who responded to the NIH survey used OITE wellness resources. And I suspect not everyone needs our wellness resources, but I suspect the number is higher than 67%. And so I hope that you can join us in making sure that everyone who needs community and support has it. And I know when I talk to trainees that when they are encouraged by people that they really respect and look up to, they're more likely to come. And I know some PIs who say you can pick what you want to go to, but you should go to one thing a week, or we have some trainees we fund and we require them to go to some things, and occasionally we get some grousing and complaining, but often we also get, I came and it helped. And so I hope you can join us in that. There is a COVID mental health task force that I serve on, chaired by Marilyn Powell and Tara Sweats in OD. Marilyn's, of course, the clinical director in NIMH, and they have compiled an amazing list of resources. Some of them are on the NIH-wide website, some are NIMH resources open to all, and some are outside resources with support. Unfortunately, some of these resources are behind the NIH firewall, and some of our trainees don't have access to that, but we try to mirror that information on our trainee COVID website. We also have a large number of YouTube videos. Some were made at the start of the pandemic, especially these 4. And while these numbers are low, we originally showed these on GoToWebinar, and we have had thousands of people participate and watch there. And the feedback of how helpful it was to just hear someone talk directly to scientists as opposed to just a general wellness talk. And these are some general talks. This is a panel discussion about supporting trainees. And this is a very in-depth webinar on resilience that focused on a variety of issues around the pandemic. And they still can be helpful. If a lab is looking for a resource, what could we watch and chat about? These might be helpful. The handout that we'll send has other resources. I talked about teaching people positive coping strategies. We are up to the 3rd part in our 6-part resilience series. Emotional intelligence and dealing with emotion in the workplace takes place next week. And then it goes on for 4 more. People can catch up and watch these 2 prior videos, but quite frankly, you don't need to catch up to come. The beauty of these is there's a webinar, and then a week or 2 weeks later, people can gather for a small group discussion. The trainees get to hear each and every one of them has some unique struggles, but there's also a whole lot of collective community-wide things going on. These include trainees across the US and in other parts of North America, so they get to meet students on other campuses. A few great things have happened, like they met someone at a school they wanted to apply to. So I really encourage these. We also have a mental health series monthly. Suicide prevention and awareness and mental health and wellness through a cultural lens are over and are archived on the YouTube channel, but we have all these topics coming up over the year. These are a mix of students, staff, and faculty at NIH and beyond, and each and every one of them has a 1-hour lecture and then a small group discussion. So those are monthly resources, not enough. Another thing is to know about the more regular or weekly resources. So we have 3 drop-in meditation groups a week and lots of courses for students to learn about the science of meditation. Of course, data on meditation is quite compelling. And I think because of that, trainees are really open to exploring mindfulness and meditation. We have a number of drop-in support groups and discussion groups. I will show you the list and talk to you about how to access them. I already mentioned Wellness Wednesday. I have to say, yesterday I went to Wellness Wednesday to lead it, but at the end of the hour, I felt so much more supported by community around disappointment from the previous evening. I think sometimes just a dose of people that you can talk with that isn't about science and aren't people you're worried about being vulnerable in front of can go a long way. And I mentioned the affinity group meetings. I mean, a lot of these, really these 4 are about both developing their positive coping strategies and finding support in community. Finding support in community also comes from the trainee groups, the postbac committee, the graduate student council, FELCOM, the Visiting Fellows Committee, and I am really, really proud of each of those committees. Individuals there have come up with so many creative ways to support themselves and each other through the pandemic. I talked a little bit about affinity groups. I wanted to make sure you knew which ones we have. The Network of African American Fellows, the LGBT Fellows and Friends Group, NIH SACNAS chapter. SACNAS is the Society for Advancing Chicanos and Native Americans in Science. Mom and Dad Docs for trainees who are also parents. Fellows of All Abilities for students and trainees with chronic illness and disability. Veterans and active duty members of the US military, and the parenting listserv that is broader than Mom and Dad Docs. Each of these affinity groups has regular meetings, most of them weekly, some of them every other week. An OITE staff member often drops in, checks in, how are people doing? Sometimes a wellness advisor goes and has a little bit of a discussion. Sometimes they plan an event and we provide the support. These are really great resources. I talked a little bit about the Postdoc committee, the grad student council, and postdocs, and these are lists to everything. One thing to note is, if you notice, there's a lot of Facebook pages and like Club PCR Google group. This allows trainees to share things that cannot be shared on trainee listservs. And I think that's really important right now, because while we can do some things in the social space, we can't go as far as they can go. And I think new trainees, especially, we talk about this at orientation, but sometimes orientation's overwhelming. And if they can be reminded that all these groups are there, it goes a long way. With the ability to think through wellness during the pandemic and the support of both the scientific directors and Dr. Collins and Dr. Tabak, I was able to hire some additional wellness support staff. And because of that, we've been able to develop 2 new programs. One is small group wellness support advising, and we have 5 topics that are currently being launched. We have space in each of these groups. Dealing with transitions are some people who just started in lab, some people who might be changing lab. It's just this whole notion of uncertainty that comes along with transitions. Imposter fears, really focus on all of the cognitive distortions that get in the way of us taking risk, asking questions. And that, I would say, is one of our most popular groups. Graduate students have their own support space, and that's a weekly group, international trainees, and then a group for people who are alone or feel lonely, regardless of whether they live with others. We have room in each of these groups. There's a requirement of a meeting with the wellness advisor who runs the group, make sure you're a good fit, and then this meets weekly. I have struggled. Some trainees say, oh, that sounds so great, but I can't come because that's my lab day. And I really would like us to consider that the benefit of some support might, even though we're really juggling time and space in lab, that it might be good to be flexible and creative around that. To join these groups, they just need to email OITE Wellness. And if we exceed capacity, we will launch some more groups. Some trainees pointed out that they really needed help learning new wellness skills. And so we have 2 skill development groups launching, actually, I think next week. One is on mindfulness and meditation, and the other is on stress management and wellness. And this is a chance for them to work with a wellness advisor, learn new skills, practice them, do some homework around it, come back the next week. And then in January, we'll launch 2 more. I'm very interested in hearing from people about other skill development groups that might be helpful. And then we have the weekly drop-in. There's not a lot of ability for us to cover every topic. And so we've tried to have these regular drop-in groups. This is the list of rotating topics. During the pandemic, this grew a lot. We did some things on struggling to sleep, dealing with telework, but we feel that we get the best turnout when we sort of compress them a little bit and have them happen regularly. Again, we welcome input on other ones that might be helpful. Trainees here don't have to commit to 6 or 8 weeks. It's, I'm really struggling right now with my application stress, let me drop in and do this, or as an international trainee, I need some support this week. And I think that these are a really great way if somebody's just feeling really out of sorts and the need to connect in a week, in any given week. So that's a summary of resources. I wanted to take questions. Some are already in the chat. Feel free to put some more in there. The first question is about Talkspace or online therapy, and there has been some discussion around that, and that discussion is ongoing. I do want to say something about the trainee health insurance. So although there is frustration sometimes in finding Aetna providers, most of our trainees have Aetna insurance. The honest truth is that the reimbursement is comparable. So while trainees may have to lay out money, the reimbursement is all but the $15 copay. And while some trainees can't do that, many can. I am working on, and I have expanded dramatically the list of providers that will see our trainees at reduced cost. We have providers that speak various languages. And I think sometimes trainees go online and they start searching the Aetna listserv, and that's a big energy barrier when you're feeling lousy. And so anyone can email us and ask for help with finding someone, and we will get onto the listservs that we're members of, reach out to people in the community and help. There's a question about providers located in the non-Bethesda sites. And yes, we have the ability to make referrals in North Carolina, in Montana, near Frederick, and near Baltimore. Obviously, we have deeper contacts in Bethesda, but we've had a wellness person traveling to each of these other sites pretty regularly. And NIAID has a wellness support staff member that works closely with us. And, you know, there's silver linings from the pandemic, and one is that trainees on every campus can participate in our activities, and we're building better bridges there. There's a question about the PowerPoint being shared, and the answer is yes. And I guess I'll say one other thing about mental health support, and that is that there is discussion among many groups and leadership about what else can be done to make sure that people in acute crisis can get help. And you know, I talk a lot about wellness, and people say, well, we have some people who need way more than wellness, and I agree. But a foundation of wellness and destigmatizing taking care of yourself could go a long way in helping, I think. There's a question about, are you tracking numbers so we can get an idea of the magnitude of the issue? I don't mean to add to the burden, but is it 50% of trainees, postdocs more than postbacks? So that's a great question. I have not looked at the granularity of the survey, and I am concerned that they might not have asked for trainee type. We are tracking participation in all of our activities, and we can do work, you know, parsing trainee groups. And I would say that the postbacks are very heavy users of our services. And that makes sense from a lot of perspectives. One is that you know, they have 2 years, and even though we give extensions, there's still this pressure to get those applications together, and now they are applying in a completely changed landscape. But we see a large number of international fellows, grad students, and postdocs as well. And I will make sure to get an executive summary of the mental health survey out to the PIs so that you can see better the data about trainees. Examples or ideas for safe ways to gather in person. You know, one of my worries is I think we all had ways to do that, and that was outside, far apart. And I have talked to many trainees who said the most important part of their week was when they sat and took a walk with 2 other trainees or a staff scientist from the group, a friend from the group. Obviously, during the winter, we're going to need to listen to the public health experts, and masks and distance and being outdoors are 3 of the things that they keep repetitively saying. One of the reasons why I wanted to advocate for some time away during daylight is that is when it will be warmest. And so the best time to get outside and have a socially distanced connection is going to be in daylight hours in the warm days. Other thing I want to say in terms of battling loneliness is it's like a chicken and an egg thing here. So I'm exhausted by Zoom, so I don't want to be on Zoom because I was on Zoom for 5 meetings, but I really need Zoom to do some games with the other graduate students. We had a retreat last week for the graduate students that the Graduate Student Council planned. And I thought the parts of it that were sort of educational were great. And they acknowledged that they were great. But the thing that was greatest was that they got to play games and laugh with their friends. And so it's like a chicken and egg. I don't want to be on Zoom, but if I'm not on Zoom, I can't do this. And so I think it's really going to be challenging for us to tell people a part of your work right now is wellness. We're going to get through this together. We all need to take care of ourselves and each other. And a part of that is doing some of these things that might not seem right in the culture of science, right? Like how many people in science talk about feelings and wellness? It's just not our culture, right? But I think it needs to be our culture. And so I would say encouraging people to do some of these things would be really helpful. I lost a question. Which services in particular tend to be used the most? So people love the drop-in meditation groups, and we would be happy to come and talk with your, your branch, your institute about some of these resources, but I can tell you that that's very popular. The Becoming a Resilient Scientist series has probably 1,000 people who watch each of the webinars, but many fewer who come to the small groups, but that's very popular. Note, let me stress, of that 1,000, 80% are extramural trainees who wish that they could be in the intramural program right now. That's very popular. We have a bi-weekly journal group using journaling for resilience and wellness. That's popular. The thing to appreciate is that each of us has our own unique way of taking care of ourselves. So some people love going to the R&W yoga or fitness class. Some people want to come to the OITE Wellness Wednesday. Some want to go to the Affinity group lunch and say, wow, here's my community and I can just not worry about any outside identity issues right now, and it's shortcut language to talk about what's happening for me. So the thing is that every trainee uses different things because every trainee is different. And so I think the really important thing to do is make sure we talk about everything. The other thing, and I would say I need to keep doing better in this, but I have really made strides, is to make sure that our wellness staff is as diverse as possible. And as you are talking about wellness, that the exemplars in your institute be as diverse as possible. Because, we all have a cultural view of wellness, some of which is the culture of science, which is we have to work hard, but some of it is the cultural view of our growing up, right? And so what we've learned from our families and communities. There's a question privately to me about the fact that many PIs are really supportive, but not all, and what can individuals do if their PI doesn't support outside activities? And so first of all, I hope, and I see from some of the questions that very senior leaders are here, people who are respected across the campus, and anything any of you can do to promote the idea that all trainees and all of us need to be engaged in taking care of ourselves in these really dangerous times. Anything you can do to help with that, I would appreciate. The second thing, and I think I really need to carefully think about this, is extending some of our services. Individual meetings can happen long before the day starts. Some of the staff work a little bit later. Everyone has lunch, and sometimes I think we have to set boundaries, even if we're a little worried about what our PI thinks, and we have to find an hour to do something. And I spend a lot of time talking to PIs about that. And I mean, talking to trainees about that. And I will I am always available. I should say that people can email OITE Wellness, but I do my best to answer all of the emails that I get. And you know, if I don't answer your email, just send me a second one. I think it's really, I think, you know, I look at the data before the pandemic and I was worried. Some data I didn't show is like the increase in suicidal ideation. And interestingly, in men, and we know from the suicide literature that men can often complete suicide attempts. And we want to really protect the community. So now is a time to be a loud vocal advocate for wellness, everyone, but especially people who are in a branch where it's not supported or a lab that's not supported. I think okay, here's another message. There's a question about postdoc appointment extensions. Has there been any consideration to extend it beyond 6 months? About a month ago, Michael and sent an email out to the SDs, and I hope the PIs, that there could actually be a full year of extension. However, I think to the disappointment of many, that additional 6 months does trigger the 2-year no work on campus, no return rule. And I'm going to mess it up if I start discussing the nuances and details, but there are increased flexibilities. I can tell you that we have done research fellows beyond the 3 years into a 9th year. When possible, with international fellows, we have given them time to be converted from a visiting fellow to a research fellow or contractor. I think everyone who has a question about extension should ask it. You can email me. If it's an international fellow, I will say we're going to need to get some input from DIS. I always have to consult with the Office of Intramural Research, but I don't think we know fully all the complexities out there. So when people ask, it's helpful for us to hear the questions. The other thing I want to say is our hands are very tied for people who are in the OPT or CPT program. So those are people who came to the US on F visas at universities. Our hands are tied because that program is really administered by the place that they started. But we are trying even there to give people advice. The earlier, the better. So people should be asking questions far in advance, especially the Division of International Services tells us that the State Department is increasingly prickly about last-minute emergencies. Trainees who ask for an extension, if you're told we're working on it, you should be checking in with your administrative officer and PI regularly. We had cases drop through the cracks accidentally, and we can't always fix it later. So reach out for support. What can we do to show support to other trainees within the lab, particularly those who don't come into lab? I think it would be ideal for every lab to have a meeting weekly with the PI and trainees that does not focus on science and getting work done. And in the handout that we'll send, there's suggestions like go to the Greater Good website, find an article about wellness and read it, or talk about hobbies, or just chat. Sometimes I find in big groups, if you have a large group or a large branch, it's sort of difficult to talk on a Zoom screen that's full of 25 people. So put people into breakout groups with a prompt. Talk about one thing that you're looking forward to. I think that it's really important that we have regular engagements and interactions with people. The other thing I'd like to say is if you reach out to someone in your group and they're not responsive, reach out again. Be really clear that you're worried and want to support them and need to hear that they're okay. Because the sooner, if you hear from a trainee that's not okay, the sooner you reach out to the Employee Assistance Program and or OITE, the better. There's a comment about talking that it was good that I talked about the gender difference, and I want to stress this again. Right? Men, you know, I see this all the time with my nephews and nieces talking to my great nephews, right? It's like, you got to be a big boy. Big boys don't cry. You know, the message has been, you don't need help. You shouldn't need help. And so it's really, really important that we not buy into that cultural fallacy. We all need support right now. Would it be possible to rotate the resilience sessions so that if they overlap with a meeting, we can still attend occasionally? We talked about that in a meeting of the wellness staff. As we've decided we need to pick sets. This week will be this particular thing, but we will be very cognizant of moving the times a little bit. Unfortunately, you know, we rely a little bit on the people who come and do those. But if there's a particular one that a trainee really wants to go to and it's not working, I feel like you should tell us, and it's on us to try to be accommodating to some degree. And, you know, if we can't, we'll tell you that we can't. Are there any other? I think I've gotten everything. Will the slides be sent or put up on the OITE website? We will email these slides out to everyone. The closed captioners are at work now, making this accessible to everyone. We will make sure to embed the closed captioning, and then this will go out via the listserv. A link, it will be up on our YouTube channel. And I thank you, Andrew, for saying that you'd like to review some of it in your branch meeting. I think that's a great way of making sure that we all know of resources. I want to stress, you know, I really focused heavily on the programs we offer because that was my goal. But there are programs being offered by NIH widely through R&W, courses through FAES. There are also regular social activities, retreats, different things that the training offices in the institutes are doing. And I think it's really important that we encourage students to use all of those resources. So Jackie just put the NIH YouTube channel, NIH OITE YouTube channel on the website. Somebody asked that we include the current times of the drop-in group meetings. We are working on that right now. We had been doing it random. First, we were doing it week to week, and then I said, this is overwhelming. And Jackie, who makes this all work, told me it was crazy, and we're trying to do it month to month. And so we will be, and we're trying to just pick set times. So the schedule for an entire month will be up on the website very, very soon. And I apologize, it should have been by today, and it just wasn't. The other thing that I'll say is any day now we will launch a website that talks about training opportunities for staff scientists and for PIs. We're going to try to provide more resources and support. I think a lot of times trainees have this idea, you know, that a lot of PIs aren't engaged and don't care. And I think it's just the opposite. A lot care and are engaged. However, like me, I started my lab having never had a single management course, a single course in how to talk to people about mental health, how to, you know, none of us really, we're all making this up. And so we will be launching a set of webinars for PIs where our wellness staff will come and lead small group discussions for PIs to talk about issues. I'm going to assume, since Michael has not chatted me, that he had something more that he was unable to move. And so what I wanted to do was convey on Michael's behalf then how much he appreciates the intramural program having pulled together to do both important COVID work, but also to keep other really important science going. And you know, he's been the deputy director for intramural research for a really, really long time, but he repeatedly tells me that this is just such a unique time for the IRP. And he really greatly appreciates everything that all of you are doing. So with that, I thank you all for coming. You know how to reach us. We will get the slides out to all of you. Please be safe. And I hope that we will all have some of the uncertainty in our lives resolved soon. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Sharon, a quick question. We have, what are the services that are more popular or that tend to be used the most? This is a question from Annapolis at NMHD.
Thank you. The meditation groups, the journaling groups, and some of the drop-in groups are very popular. The imposter fears drop-in group sometimes, you know, it's just lots and lots of people show up. The other thing is that resilience series, and I would appreciate if people would encourage trainees to do both the webinar and come back for the small group discussion. Thank you. I must have missed that question. Thanks.
Thank you, Sharon. No, I think it was a great talk. We cannot do our job if we're not mentally fit. So recognizing this is just really, really great. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very, very much. Stay safe, everyone.